All right, so earlier we mentioned that there were 4 different types of macromolecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. These 4 types of macromolecules. So now we're going to go into each one and really go into what are the elements of each, what's the structure of each, and what's the function of each. So let's start with carbohydrates. So number 1, carbs. You have all heard about carbohydrates as something like breads, right? So like bread. You also have carbohydrates like pasta, like noodles, like rice. And this function of carbohydrates is to give short-term energy. So the way it does this is by making chains out of glucose. So glucose is the name of the monomer that you're going to need to know. This is the prime example of a carbohydrate. So glucose kind of looks like a hexagon shape. And when you put many different glucose together, like so, like in a chain, or it could be branches. It could be like this. It could be branches onto a different side, so on and so forth. No matter what you do, this is glucose. This gives you short-term energy storage. The traditional long-term, long vocabulary term for a monomer for this is just called a monosaccharide. Now, I know this is kind of long, but it can also be broken up into little pieces. For example, saccharide here just means sugar, and all of these carbohydrates at its function, at its fundamental, is just sugar. So all of this is just sugar. The mono here just means 1, so it's kind of fitting because your glucose is just 1 sugar. Monosaccharide. Each one of these is a monosaccharide. Each one of these is glucose. Sometimes you might see something that's not glucose here. Could be glucose, could be fructose, so on and so forth. But either way, they're just 1 molecule. So this right here is 1 monosaccharide or monomer. Okay, this is another monomer, and this is another monomer, and the whole thing, this very, very long chain, is gonna give you your polymer, which is your carbohydrates. Now, your carbohydrates, you need to know the elements that are in here. It's actually really easy to figure this out because carbo is just carbon. And then hydrates, you told me, was water, so that's H2O. So that means all of the elements inside of carbohydrates are just C, H's, and O. So if something has only C's and H's and O's in it, there's a chance that it is a carbohydrate. Some more examples of carbohydrates you might find are things like, so we have bread, we have pasta, we also have, these are examples here. We also have cellulose, which is a biological example, cellulose. We also have things like starch. This is the thing that makes your potatoes, that makes your potatoes white and kind of floury on the inside. That's the starch. Okay, so first was carbohydrates. Great. Now let's move on to the second one called lipids. So number two, lipids. So if carbohydrates are short-term energy, your lipids are going to be responsible for long-term energy. And when we say long-term energy, we mean when you store your energy, you store them as lipids, but they can survive. You can rely on them for months on end. Your carbohydrates, we're talking about only a couple of days, hours to days, a couple of days of short-term energy. But your lipids give you long-term energy for a couple of weeks, days, months in the long run. Okay, so examples of your lipids, if you are looking for examples, these are all of the things that are your fats and oils, waxes, cholesterol is here as well. Cholesterol. The important thing is all of these are non-polar. Non-polar, as in they do not mix with water. We talked about polar versus non-polar in a previous video. So if you want to check that out, go look for the one that talks about water, properties of water. Okay, what do lipids look like? These are not your traditional chains. Every other macromolecule is going to look like a chain of some sort. Your lipids are not really a chain. They're more like 3 chains put together as one. So when we talk about 3 chains, we mean chain number 1 here, chain number 2, and chain number 3. So these 3, 1, 2, 3, are all of your fatty acids. These are just long hydrocarbon chain, meaning these are made out of C's and H's that extend forever and ever and ever until, of course, you run out. However long it is going to determine the amount of energy you store. Now this at the end here, this is your glycogen that holds these together. So your one lipid, this entire thing, this is called a triglyceride. Now your lipids in general are also going to have C's, H's, and O's as elements, which means they are exactly the same elements-wise as your carbohydrates. So just remember that the 2 that involves energy, short and long term, have both C's, H's, and O's. All of your energy-related molecules have C, H's, and O's. Okay, now let's move on to your proteins. Number 3, proteins. So people might also think that proteins are used for energy, but in fact they don't. So when you think about proteins, you think of meats, you think of beans, anything else that you can, or tofu perhaps, that you get your proteins from. These are all food examples. These are all food examples. Some actual one that you may need to know is that there is a thing called lactase that is going to break down your lactose sugar. So proteins, what do they actually do? They do a lot of things. So we know they build muscle, so we're going to use them for structure. We know that we need proteins in our everyday lives, not only for structure, but for our immune system as well. They help us fight diseases. And they also, and this is the really important one, are enzymes. Enzymes, which is going to help you speed up your chemical reactions. Now the reason why we have enzymes, the reason why they're important is because without them, all of the chemical reactions in our body, the things that break down food, the things that build you back up, they're going to be too slow to give you enough energy or store enough energy for you to live. So this is going to be super important, so important in fact that we have a whole video dedicated to it that's coming up next. Okay, so we know what they do, here's what they are. My monomers for your proteins, talk about monomers now. What do they look like? They're also like a chain. But they're kind of in this shape for each monomer. So this one is going to bond. Well, once they bind, they look less like that. They look more like just regular blocks. But each monomer is called in amino acid. And together, all of this combined, amino acid, together combined, they're going to make a polypeptide. Okay, the thing about protein is, yes, it does have your C's and H's and O's just like the other two, but this one is also going to have an N. This one's also going to have a nitrogen inside. So if you're looking at a picture of a molecule and you don't know what they look like, or you're trying to find out what they are, look for the nitrogen, and that will tell you if it could be a protein or not. Okay, last but not least, number 4, our last one is nucleic acid. Last one's a nucleic acid. So this one, you guys probably know already as your DNA and RNA. If you remember that DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So the nucleic acid part is already in the name. Your DNA and RNA, the reason why they are important is because they are used to store genetic information. Your genetic information are things like your hair color, your eye color, and so on and so forth. Now the structure of these, they do come in monomers as well, but their monomers have 3 parts. That's one monomer. This is another monomer. And then if we add another one down here to make 3, let's do that right now. That would be another monomer. So even though they're a little bit more complicated and have multiple parts, this one still here is a monomer called nucleotide. This one's a little bit easier to remember because nucleotide has nuclei in it, same with nucleic acid. So that's one nucleotide, this is one nucleotide, and the bottom one is one as well. And together, they make a DNA or an RNA molecule. Now, these DNA also have C, H's, and O, so all of them have CH and O. But this one also has a nitrogen and it has a phosphorus. So now we're adding one on. So if you look on a picture and they ask you what macromolecule is it, and it has a P anywhere in it, then it has to be a nucleic acid. Okay, so those were the 4. Let's just summarize that real quick. For my carbohydrates, going straight down the line, one easy way to remember this is with the mnemonic cho, cho, chan, chop. So they go straight down, cho, cho, chan, chop. Carbs, lipids, protein, nucleic acids. Your monomers for carbohydrates are your monosaccharide. Specifically, glucose is the one you need to know the most. For lipids, we're going to consider this, since it's not a chain, we're going to consider these to be the fatty acids and the glycerol. For proteins, the monomers, your amino acids. For nucleic acids is the nucleotide. Please be sure you do not get your proteins, amino acids, and your nucleic acids mixed up, because both nucleic acids and amino acids have the word acid in it. That's not the case. Match the nucleic acid with the nucleotide. Okay, so this is the important part of the word, not the acid and amino acid. Okay, so most important functions for carbs is short-term energy. For lipids, it is long-term energy. For proteins, we have structure and enzyme function, which is to speed up chemical reaction. And nucleic acids is used for genetic information storage. Okay, one last thing that will help you remember or identify carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, amino acids is by their name. So here we have OS. Anything that ends with OSE, anything, glucose, lactose, galactose is going to be a carbohydrate. Okay, anything that ends with ASE, like lactase, pectinase, is going to be a protein. And for lipids, it's not as clear and dry because it's a good chance that if something ends with OL, that it is a lipid, although this is not true for all molecules. So take this with a grain of salt. Don't use this as 100% fact. It is just a guide to help you make an educated guess that if something ends with OL, that it's a lipid. But OSE, always carbohydrates. ASE, always proteins, specifically enzymes. So all enzymes can be named ASE. Not all enzymes have ASE, but all ASEs are enzymes, and therefore they are proteins. Okay, so after this, make sure that you know how to identify a molecule just by its shape or elements. Please also know how to identify a molecule by its function or by its monomers. So these things you have to know. If I give you any sort of information that can differentiate between carbs, lipids, proteins, or nucleic acids, you need to be able to tell me that's exactly what it is. Okay? So this is mostly a memorization portion of this unit, but you can do it. It's not that hard. It's not that long. Good luck. I'll see you in enzymes.